On today's show, the Cavs have not made many, if any, external moves. That means if they're going to get better, internal development is going to be key. I've got Ben Axelrod with me. We're going to talk about that on today's Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Also, check us out on YouTube. Just search Locked On Cavs. If you're watching this video right now, click that thumbs up button for me, hit subscribe, and click the notification bell as well so you get the latest Locked On Cavs content. Proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, and now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Hi again, everybody. I'm Danny Cunningham. You might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers, places like 92.3 The Fan, Cleveland Magazine, and a number of other stops along the way. Today, lucky enough to be joined by Ben Axelrod, senior editor at Awful Announcing. He is the favorite media reporter of places like the Pat McAfee Show, the Dan Le Batard Show, and most recently, he's become the head football coach at Texas State University in our EA Sports College Football Online Dynasty. Brought Ben in today. We're going to talk a lot about how the Cavs can improve. What I had him do while he was taking some time away from coaching in our video game league, come up with 3 ways that we believe the Cavs can improve despite not adding anybody other than Jalen Tyson, obviously a couple of two-way guys as well, but not anybody of significance from the outside. Ben, thanks again for joining us. What's way number 1 you think the Cavs can improve internally?
Yeah, I think when you think about what the Cavs can do to get better this season, because they haven't made those acquisitions, is there's 3 things that are really, really obvious. So I tried to go off the board, but there's one that's just so glaring to me that it has to be said. And that to me is Evan Mobley making a massive jump. And it's weird to say massive because I don't think he's that far off, but I do think when you look at a guy who's a borderline all-star, to make that jump to where I think he needs to be for this team to take a significant step forward is like all NBA, not even just all-star, but like all NBA. And those are those might just be 2 steps away, but those are 2 massive steps. So to me, if Evan Mobley can make that jump and solidify himself as this team's second best player, if not first best player, that to me is like the way this team can ultimately reach its ceiling. So that one I just think is kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah, I had that on my list too. I think that is the no-brainer of no-brainers. I don't know if he has the highest ceiling on the Cavs anymore because, and part of that is, I think Donovan Mitchell is a better player than he ever was in Utah. I think he's probably exceeded the expectations had for him when they made that trade. Like that trade, I will always say, was a bet on Evan Mobley reaching his ceiling, and Donovan Mitchell has exceeded what I thought, or in what I think even maybe the Cavs thought Donovan Mitchell could be. I think Evan Mobley developing offensively, while defensively he's been fantastic. I have no complaints there. I think very few people do. But what he needs to do offensively, I think, is a number of things. One, and the way that I had phrased this was Evan needs to be a more aggressive offensive player. And then the other thing that I do think is very important, I think that he and Donovan Mitchell need to work better together when they're on the floor. I think we see a lot of times the best big for Donovan has been Jarrett Allen in these 2 years, and we've seen, and part of it's due to the injuries they sustained at the same time, but we've seen Evan and Darius Garland paired more together and Donovan paired with Jarrett Allen. I would like to see that flipped at times this year, because I think if those two could get it together a little bit more and just be a more potent pairing, that would be something that could elevate the Cavs too, even if Evan doesn't reach the best player on the Cavs stature that we think he possibly could.
Yeah, no, I think that makes total sense. And that to me, and we'll get to this with my next one, but there are just so many questions about this roster's fit moving forward. And I think because of those concerns, that leads you to situations like you mentioned where Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley aren't playing together as much as you would ideally like. And that's a side effect of this roster having its deficiencies in terms of fit. So yeah, I'm in total agreement there. I think like you said, I mean, Evan Mobley defensively was essentially the defensive player of the year, his second year in the league. It's offense where he needs to get more aggressive, and you see flashes of the jumper, you see flashes of the playmaking. It's just a matter of making that a more consistently rounded part of his game.
So let me ask you this. Where do you think the lowest hanging fruit is in terms of the easiest way for him to improve? Like maybe it's not obviously it's not the only thing he would need to do to make that jump to the level we're talking about. But what do you think in terms of his improvement is something that could come the easiest and just kind of like be the easiest step up for him to make?
I think it's that assertiveness, because I think it's there. And I mean, I know it's there because we saw it in the series against Boston. And so it's just a matter of doing it on a more consistent basis, because we know when he does it, he's effective at it, and that it's what's best for the Cavaliers. It's not one of those things where he's getting his and everybody's standing around watching it. It is what this team ultimately needs to give Donovan Mitchell that consistent second, the Robin to his Batman, if you will. So I think it's a mindset, it's an assertiveness, and it's a confidence in his offensive game, because I think that's ultimately where it's lacking.
So the area that I think it is actually the reason of mine that I want to talk about first, and that is the Cavs playing faster. So under JB Bickerstaff, we know that they've ranked at or near the very bottom of the NBA in terms of pace. Like, they're just not a team that has pushed the ball up the floor. They haven't, in my opinion, gotten enough easy baskets getting out in transition. And when I watch Evan play, that to me is the area where he looks the most comfortable with the basketball in his hands. And even in the half court, when he catches the ball while he's moving, that is when I think he's at his most effective. So I do think if the Cavs quicken up the pace a little bit, and Kenny Atkinson, in his time in Brooklyn, the Nets played much, much faster than the Cavs have played, at least in relative to the rest of the NBA. They were a top 10 team 3 of the 4 years Atkinson was in charge in Brooklyn. That 4th year, they were 11th, which the Cavs have not sniffed 11th in a long time. So I do think that is an area, just by trying to squeeze a few extra possessions, trying to squeeze a few more possessions of transition basketball when Evan Mobley specifically is on the floor, I think that could be a way, Ben, where we really start to see him take off and discover that assertiveness, because he can just grab that rebound and go.
Yeah. I mean, there are times where he reminds me of Draymond, which is like kind of a weird comparison to make, because they're so built, they're built so differently.
Right.
And Draymond's definitely more assertive and more aggressive. But when Evan finds that in him, like you can see stretches where they're running the offense through him, and that he's really the focal point, and he has the ability to really play at all 3 levels of the court when he's in that mindset. So yeah, I mean, I think that it's all connected between the assertiveness and the pace that he plays at.
And then the other thing that people will always bring up with Evan, and I'm surprised we've made it this far into the conversation without really talking about it, but is that 3-point shooting, because we know the Cavs play a very different style of basketball than most of the NBA today, where they've got 2 bigs on the floor, and even some other teams that do deploy the 2 big lineups, like Minnesota with Karl-Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert out there. Well, Karl-Anthony Towns is one of the best ever big men shooters in NBA history. The Cavs don't have either of their bigs like that. So how important do you personally, because I do think it is something that maybe it gets overblown a little bit, and I think there are other ways to create space without this happening, but what do you think Evan Mobley needs to look like as a 3-point shooter for that front court pairing to work?
So I think him developing that shot and hitting it on a consistent basis, I think for really the last 2 years, like that's the biggest possible thing that could happen for the Cavs. That would be the thing that would be most beneficial to them on the offensive side of the court. The problem is, like, we're entering year 4. Like, at what point do you stop asking whether that's going to be a part of his game? Like, we're 3 years in here, and we don't have much of a track record that that's something that he does. We see flashes. In this past season, I thought we saw a little bit more assertiveness, but I mean, he's not going to be Karl-Anthony Towns, and that's obviously that's a high ceiling to reach. But even just can he be considered a stretch 4? Can he be considered a guy who you have to guard out there on a consistent basis? I've kind of given up on that idea. I think it's possible, but I'm the mind going into year 4. Like I'll believe it when I see it now.
Yeah, that is certainly it for me. And I do think the shot at times has looked good enough, but the volume hasn't been there. Where he shot, I think it was 37% he finished at. He was actually a pretty good shooter after his knee surgery when he came back from that injury, and after the ankle injury that he suffered too late in the season. But he needs to take like 4 or 5 of those a game, and I just don't know if he's ever going to be comfortable letting it fly from out there the way that he probably needs to in order for this Cavs team to utilize him, or even for him to be remotely considered a stretch four. Like, I just don't think that's ever going to happen. But I think he needs to be guarded. At least teams need to at least think about the threat of Evan Mobley from the outside. And I'm not sure if we're going to get there or not.
Yeah, I think that's totally valid.
Up next, I do want to talk a little bit more about pace because I think Evan Mobley can benefit from it. And I've got another guy that I think needs to step up on this Cavs team. We'll see if Ben agrees with me, if pace could make him a better basketball player next season. That's straight ahead right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships. Also, what keeps your ride or die alive. The Cavs are looking for their formula to win championships. Well, eBay Motors has the formula to keep your car in championship condition because they've got everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, style, all 3 of those, maybe something else, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you will always be able to find exactly what you are looking for with eBay Motors. Plus, with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. That's ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. We talked about how Evan Mobley needs to improve and what he can do to make the Cavs better despite no moves being made really on the outside that could affect this team, with this roster being largely the same. And now, Ben, I want to talk about Darius Garland because I think playing at a faster pace is something that can help him. And part of it's because, and I know he had just a nightmare of a season, the fractured jaw. There were some off the court things that I do think were plaguing him. I think there were a couple of other injuries that were hampering him a little bit as well throughout the season. But I think playing faster is something that can help him out, because I do think with him, and I think it's a good thing he can play slow too. I need to make that clear. Like, I think that is a very necessary and good part of his game. But I also think that there are times where his decision making just becomes lackluster. And I think part of it can be overthinking because he's not necessarily playing fast enough. So that is one of my other ways that I think this team could just naturally improve if a small tweak is made in that area.
Yeah, it's definitely, I said there are 3 big things. And if Evan Mobley's one, then getting Darius Garland back into his 2022, 2023 form, like that's number 2, and it's not far behind. So yeah, I mean, I think you make a great point with the pace. I think, it's just so hard to know what went wrong last season because it seemed like so many things went wrong for Darius. I do have concerns about the injuries moving forward because it does seem like they're starting to stack up, and that's obviously a natural concern when it comes to smaller point guards. But I think that, whatever it is to get him on track, whether it's pace, whether it's his pairing with Donovan Mitchell and how they go about that, whether it's playing with Evan Mobley or Jared Allen or just the team's overall fit, like they need to figure out what it is they need to do to get Darius Garland going, because he is too important to this team and too important to this roster.
I agree. And I'm wondering where you stand on this, because I'm at the point now where he and Mitchell did work together that first year. I thought that was really good basketball, particularly in the regular season. The playoff series against the Knicks was a bit of a different story for a number of different reasons. But I do think he and Donovan Mitchell showed they can work together. But with the nightmare disaster of the last season, and you bring up a valid point about the injuries and how those can just really build up on a guard, especially his size, where he is thought of as a smaller guard. He's 6'1". He could not afford to lose the 15 pounds he lost when he fractured his jaw. But if you set that stuff aside and you blame his play last year for the injuries, are you willing to look past what he was on the court last year and believe in him again? Because that is one of the things that just, I kind of want to forget that happened, because I think so much of it was unfortunately out of his control.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't know if it's realistic. I think that, when you're the Cavs and when have now 4 guys tied up to big money contracts, you see your window here in the East. How open it is, that's a different question, but the Cavs are very much in win now contention mode. And so, if things go awry, if things, they get off to a slow start, or they have a slump heading into January or toward the trade deadline, then it's okay. What can we do with this roster? And you're not trading Donovan Mitchell. You're not trading Evan Mobley. So that's going to lead to possibly some uncomfortable conversations about Darius Garland and or Jared Allen. And so a part of that is what happened last season, because you do, it just kind of is what it is. Like, I hate to say it, but like it's on the resume now. And so obviously you hope that it works out otherwise, but if they do fall short of expectations in the first half of the season, then you're going to be looking at, what you can potentially do come February.
Right. And I do wonder, I'm glad you brought up February, because one, I think it's just, I'm not saying that the Cavs will be trading Jared Allen. I'm not saying they won't be trading Jared Allen. I just think it's interesting that he signed that contract extension on August 2nd, which means he's eligible to be traded 6 months from that date, which coincidentally is 4 days before the NBA trade deadline coming up on February 6th. With Darius Garland, though, I wonder how much his value can be rehabbed before the trade deadline, because right now, I do think part of the reason he's on this team is, one, the Cavs still do believe in him as somebody that can be an all-star caliber guard, even if he's not making all-star teams. But two, what was the market for him this summer in terms of teams wanting to trade for him? What were those teams willing to give up? Like, would you have accepted what the Hawks got for DeJounte Murray for Darius Garland? I don't think that I would have. I don't think that package is something that the Cavs should have been entertaining there. So how much can Garland make up for that? And I guess if we're at the point where he rehabs his value so much, that means he's having a good season and you would want to keep him around. So I think it's a very interesting discussion to be had.
Yeah, it's really kind of a like slippery slope or like a sliding doors type of situation where, like you said, if Darius Garland's playing well and he's rehabbing that his value as a trade asset, well, you're probably winning and you probably don't want to trade Darius Garland. But conversely, we're at the point now where let's say he gets off to a slow start again, or he slumps or whatever. Like, now we're talking about, is he a negative asset? Like, is he even a guy who you can get rid of and get back, a piece that's going to help you win now? I don't know. And I think, I thought trading him this past summer, as much as I would have liked to see the Cavs be aggressive in any sort of fashion, it just doesn't make sense to trade him when he's at his lowest value. So at this point, I think you're looking at, hey, either he bounces back, or, we're already looking at trading him for 40 cents on the dollar anyways. What's it hurt if we go down to 20 cents here? So, but yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, you can't have one without the other.
Right, exactly. And then the other thing, as we wrap up on Darius Garland, the other thing that I do think is important for him to get back to what he was, I think he needs to be taking more catch and shoot 3-pointers. I think that with what we saw from Donovan Mitchell when Darius Garland was out, I was really impressed with the way Donovan acted as a playmaker. And obviously Darius is a guy that is a lead ball handler. He's a lead playmaker. He does that stuff really well when he's playing at his best. But I think for him to really hit his ceiling offensively with the current version of the Cavs, part of his diet, I think a bigger part of his diet than it has been, needs to be catching and shooting the basketball on the wing from passes from Donovan Mitchell. Last year, he took 6.2 3-pointers per game. I think if that number is around 8 per game, the Cavs are going to be in a really good spot with him. I think for me personally, Ben, that is something that if that number goes up, that's almost like my barometer with Darius Garland. If he boosts that up, I think he's going to have a really good year.
Yeah, and we know it's there. We know it's in him. We know it's a part of his game. I mean, that's part of why he was so successful those 2 previous seasons before last season. So we know it's there. Like it's just a matter of building back that confidence and doing whatever the Cavs need to do stylistically to accommodate that.
And we've got more reasons, or more ways, I should say, the Cavs can improve internally next year. Some small tweaks we need to make. Ben has another one for me next, right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show is also brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard me talk about FanDuel a bunch. You know why? Because it's America's #1 sports book. So, of course, I'm going to talk about it a bunch. It's the place I go when I take a look at, hey, the Cleveland Browns taking on the Dallas Cowboys. That's just a little over a week away. The Browns are 2.5-point favorites. Maybe you want to slide in there on FanDuel, or maybe there's another bet you like. Maybe you think that Deshaun Watson is going to score the first touchdown of the season for the Cleveland Browns. That's a place you could make a little bit of money on FanDuel. Well, right now, FanDuel does have something that's just a little bit different for you. Right now, through September 22nd, so you've got a little bit of time here, got about 3 weeks, all FanDuel customers can bet $5, not a ton, $5, and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. I've got NFL Sunday Ticket. I don't know how people live without NFL Sunday Ticket. You can watch every game, every out-of-market game Sunday afternoon. It is one of the best inventions for mankind. And just by betting $5 with FanDuel between now and September 22nd, you can get a free trial for 3 whole weeks. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you will be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, plus you can cancel at any time. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon, LOCKEDON, to download America's #1 sports book. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify. Also, check us out on YouTube. Just search Locked On Cavs if you're not watching this video. Ben, do you have another way the Cavs can internally improve this upcoming season?
Yes. So maybe this is cheating as far as this exercise goes, but you mentioned February.
Cheating. Just do it.
Well, let's cheat a little then.
You mentioned February. If you're not cheating, you're not trying.
Exactly. You mentioned February and Jared Allen. And just because the Cavs haven't been aggressive this summer doesn't mean they can't be aggressive from now up all the way up until February. And so we talked about, this team's fit. And I think like the part of the conversation when we talk about fit, because people get really defensive when you say that Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell aren't the best fit together, or when you say Evan Mobley and Jared Allen aren't the best fits together. And I don't necessarily think those two pairings are the issue, but I think the issue is then that's 80% of your starting lineup that you're not sure is totally in the best situation on the court. And so I think there's a domino effect with that. And I think that, even if you were to just split up one of the pairings and even if you don't get equal value back for the sake of this exercise, let's say for Jared Allen, like I still think the idea that this roster fits better by making a trade to split up one of those pairings. I could see a world where like the Cavs go on a big run in March and we're looking at like it being a matter of all they did was change stylistically because they made a trade. It's not, almost an addition by subtraction type of situation, just because it would make the fit that much better, in my mind, at least.
Right. And I think any return on one of those guys, and I do think when you're talking about this exercise, you're talking about trading Jared Allen or Darius Garland. Like you're not trading Donovan Mitchell and you're not trading Evan Mobley. Those guys are untouchable right now for the Cavs, but I think those are the only 2 untouchable guys for the Cavs. And if you are trading Jared Allen or you're trading Darius Garland, I don't think that's a deal the Cavs are making unless they get, at the very least, a starting caliber wing player in return. And one of my biggest issues with this roster is Dean Wade. And it's not because Dean Wade's not a good player. He is a good player. But he's a good player that gets hurt a little too often for my liking. And he is, to me, kind of one of the more irreplaceable players on this roster because they don't have another guy like him. They don't have another guy that's that size. Like if Evan Mobley goes down the way he did last year, well, you've got Jared Allen. if Darius Garland goes down the way he did last year, you've got another all-star guard in Donovan Mitchell. Right now, there's just such a lack of depth on the wing. I do think if they make a trade like that, it has to be for that. And I could see that being a thing that they just kind of modernize themselves a little bit. Instead of playing the too big or the too small guard lineups, they're playing a style that fits more in with the rest of the NBA and allows their talent, which they are an immensely talented team. And I think that sometimes gets lost in the shuffle here. But I think it allows that talent to thrive.
Yeah, I mean, you notice when Dean Wade's not out there, whether he's
which
injured.
Is crazy.
Right. I mean, we're talking about effectively the 8th or 9th man on the roster, but like, you notice when he's not on the court. Like you notice when they're going long stretches without Dean Wade, you feel it. You can tell like something is missing from this roster. And I think a part of it is that he is the key to unlocking a lot of the more versatile lineups that this team can play with, especially when you factor in Karis LeVert, who's always, for as long as he's on the roster, is always going to be a core member of the rotation, whether he's in the starting lineup or the 6th man. But he's not the most versatile player in terms of his fit with the other guys on the court. So Dean Wade is like, when he's out there, that allows you to do a whole lot more things than you're able to do otherwise. And yeah, I mean, that's where do you go from there? They've kind of made their bed with this one.
Right. Dean Wade to me is like the ultimate, do you watch the Cavs or do you just look at box scores type of thing? Because if you just look at box scores, you're like, who cares? He averages like 6 points a game. Yeah, he's a good shooter. He's a good defender, all these things. But it's not a big deal if you just, look at the box scores. But if you actually watch the games, you're like, okay, this is actually a big deal because he is a good connector and he's somebody that they just don't have a replacement for. So I kind of view him as are you a Cavs fan? Because if you are, Dean Wade's importance. If you just look at the box score, if you just scroll Twitter, then you might not quite understand it. That's sort of where I'm at with that. But I do think that could be a way the Cavs improve by adding some more depth on the wing because they trade one of their core 4, which of course would ultimately be Jarrett Allen anytime after February 2nd or Darius Garland, which I think is a little bit more unlikely. But Ben, thank you so much for doing this. Very much appreciate you taking some time to be on Locked On Cavs with me. This was a blast. We will definitely have to do it again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Anytime.
That is Ben Axelrod, a senior editor at Awful Announcing. He also has a podcast, which you can check out anywhere you get your podcast. It's called The Play by Play. It comes out every Wednesday, Apple, Spotify. Everywhere you listen to Locked On Cavs, you can listen to Ben's podcast as well. If you're into sports media, it really is an awesome listen. They're just getting started, but I know Ben and actually Locked On Suns host Brandon Clean do a great job with that podcast. It's a terrific listen if you are into that kind of thing. But once again, thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. You can check us out anywhere you get your podcast. Make sure you're subscribed on Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Also, check us out on YouTube. Hit that thumbs up button, click the notification bell, and make sure you are subscribed. We will be back next week with a special guest on Locked On Cavs.